When the dream started, I was standing with two other guys in this dark concrete room. There were pipes all over, and a small hatch in the ground. One of the guys was holding a video camera, the other a flashlight. I pried open the hatch, which I could now see led to this dark, cramped tube with a ladder inside. The guy with the light tossed a rock in to see how deep it was. We didn't hear it hit the bottom. He told me it must be pretty deep and that this would be a good video. I got the feeling that we were doing this for some kind of Halloween stunt. Anyway, I took a radio from the camera guy and started climbing down. It was pitch black and I was starting to get really creeped out, so I started doing this weird, rapid downward climbing and felt really disoriented until reaching the bottom. When I looked around, I saw a large dark room. It was the lobby to some kind of old hospital, it looked like, with two staircases on either side that led up to a platform. The walls were all brick. I don't know why, but I feel like somehow that's important. Anyway, a sign above the platform said, -100. Somehow, I was 100 floors below ground level. Inexplicably, the room was bathed in moonlight, and as my eyes adjusted, I could see the silhouettes of two little girls on the platform, one on each side. I stared at them for a while and felt extremely uneasy. I started to climb back up the ladder. Every floor above it was the same as -100, but without the moonlight, they were almost pitch black. From then on, I would see the rooms, but mostly I saw images, one for each floor. On the next one, I saw the twins from the first area in the same spots, only this time they were lying on morgue slabs, chins tilted down so they could look at me. The one on the right had her eyes focused directly on me. I wanted out, and I started madly clawing at the ladder. As I went, I started having visions and images of things like patient abuse and rioting. It all came flying at me in rapid succession. About halfway up, my radio came on, and I heard the flashlight guy's voice. He told me that he was waiting for me on a nearby floor, and that I should stop and go to him. I didn't believe it, and I just kept going. As I neared the top, the images changed from violence and death to other things like miscarriage and birth defects. Finally, after several minutes of this horror, I reached up while climbing and hit something solid. I pushed the hatch off and climbed back into the room from the beginning. The camera and flashlight guys were standing over me asking what happened, but I was too exhausted to answer. My most terrifying dream was actually a night of off and on sleep paralysis. I was staying at my aunt's place, and her mother-in-law lived with them. My mother-in-law was an old bat of a lady that was sweet to your face, but could get really nasty behind your back. Anyway, I woke up lying in bed paralyzed, and saw that old bat going to the restroom. She shuffled out after a few minutes of standing in there with the lights out, but she came out breathing awfully heavy and raspy. Now, instead of shuffling back to her room, she slowly turned and started moving into my room, still breathing in that deep, raspy way. Then, out of nowhere, she quickly shut the door and just stood there. It was pitch black now, and I could hear that raspy breathing coming from somewhere in the room. By now I was beyond terrified, but something compelled me to crawl out of bed and attempt to touch her. My movements were very sluggish, but I made my way slowly toward a faint silhouette. The breathing had abruptly stopped. I reached out to touch her face, dead silent and dead still. Immediately, she violently slammed me into the bed, and I fell right through it, into darkness and eventually some rather pleasant and colorful dreams. I woke up in the morning still in a paralyzed state with this intense and sinking dread that something very wrong was about to happen. Not wanting a repeat of earlier in the night, I calmed myself down and let the paralysis wear off. I went about my day normally after eventually climbing out of bed, except I kept eyeing the old demon lady. She's so innocent to my face, but still, sometimes I wonder. I had this same nightmare for months when I was a kid. The dream takes place on a huge area divided into two regions. In the first region, all the humans on Earth lived, a very crowded place. Both regions were divided by a very clear border, which all people were told not to cross because just beyond that border, a huge, old, dark, and gloomy garden lay. In the middle of the garden, there was a very old, large house made of wood. And in this house, 3 witches lived. They had made a deal with all humans to not touch them as long as they stayed beyond the border. One day, my friends and I played a game to see who would dare to go the longest beyond the border. These witches were really fast, so you could only tap your foot beyond the border and they would come rushing. Of course, I had to be stupid enough to go across the border by about 2 meters, and suddenly I got snapped up by a witch. They rushed me back to their house to sacrifice or eat me. And then I woke up. I had this dream for years, and I've been scared of old people ever since. This dream started out with me walking down some docks, looking into the completely black and gray murky water below. It's an overcast day, and I'm completely alone. Suddenly, bodies descend from the gray clouds on black ropes and slowly approach me. I run into the streets to try and escape them, but the buildings around me have no windows or doors. They just look like large boxes of rusted, riveted metal. I panic and run to a hole in the street. It's not a manhole, but actually quite large and rectangular. The hole leads to a stairwell, decently lit with wood-paneled walls. As I descended at a rapid pace, I noticed the walls began to bulge into heads that screamed and tried to bite me as I ran past them. I reached the bottom of the stairwell and discovered an old wooden door, its blue paint chipped and cracked with age. I ran through the blue door into a pitch-black room. It was strange in that there was absolutely no light, although I could distinguish the floor, ceiling, and 4 walls. As I stood there, I heard an extremely deep, muted rumbling crescendo from all around. I then woke up. I have always dreamed a lot, and while most of my dreams are nothing special, every once in a while I have a dream that's very vivid or almost cinematic, and fills me with this amazing feeling that can last for days. Anyway, I recently discovered how horrible it is when that kind of dream comes in the form of a nightmare. Strangely enough, I don't actually remember most of the dream, only the end. It started off very movie-like, with long, scenic shots and a narrator narrating the life of a woman and her family. I don't remember this part very clearly, but I got the sense that she had died somehow. Near the end, there was a still shot of a painting of the woman sitting in a chair wearing a red dress. The painting was made with primarily red colors, including the background, and had this kind of 1800s style. The shot lingered on this painting, wobbling slightly like someone was actually holding a camera, and after a while I could hear a low groan that got louder and louder, and suddenly burst out in a loud shriek. I jerked awake so hard I actually sprained my ankle. I was 20 years old then, and I cried for the first time in years. I didn't sleep anymore that night. The next day, I was talking to my father, and he was telling me how he'd had a really weird dream the night before. I didn't think much about it, but Then he mentioned that he always had these kinds of weird dreams when there's a full moon. After that, I kept an eye on moon phases, and the next time there was a full moon, I had a nightmare again. A different theme this time, but still it had that mounting shriek. Sounds that slowly become louder terrify me now. It hasn't happened since, thank God, but I always seem to have these vivid and memorable dreams whenever there's a full moon.